My husband emptied our joint savings at 3 inches the morning, wired $47,000 to his mother's failing restaurant, and when I confronted him, his mother screamed that I was selfish and ungrateful. I didn't argue. I just smiled and said, "You should check which account he actually wired it from. That wire didn't come from our savings. It came from the escrow account I manage for my clients. And what my husband just did isn't a family disagreement. It's a federal crime." This is where the story truly begins. And trust me, you're going to want to hear every word. Make sure you subscribe so you don't miss what happens next. And we always love hearing from you. Where in the world are you watching from today? Drop it in the comments. The migraine had been building all day. By 6 in the evening, I was done. I turned off my laptop, drew the blackout curtains in our bedroom, and crawled under the covers with an ice pack pressed against my temple. At 31, I rarely got migraines anymore, but when they hit like a freight train. I worked as a forensic accountant for a mid-size firm in Charlotte, North Carolina. My job was essentially being a financial detective. I traced money, found discrepancies, untangled fraud. It required laser focus, which was impossible when my skull felt like it was being squeezed in a vice. My husband, Derek, knew I was down for the count. He brought me a glass of water around 8, kissed my forehead, and told me to rest. "I'll handle everything tonight, babe. Don't worry about a thing." I mumbled a thank you and sank deeper into the pillows. I was asleep before 9. It was the vibrating of my phone on the nightstand that dragged me out of unconsciousness. Not one buzz, not two. A relentless, furious chain of notifications that wouldn't stop. I cracked one eye open. The bedroom was pitch dark. The clock read 3:47 a.m. I grabbed the phone, wincing at the screen brightness. My stomach dropped straight through the mattress. Alert. Wire transfer of $47,000 initiated from account ending in 8,812. Alert. Wire transfer confirmation pending for account ending in 8,812. Alert. Wire transfer of $47,000 completed. Recipient, Rosalina's Kitchen LLC. For a full 10 seconds, I didn't breathe. Account ending in 8,812. That wasn't our joint savings. That wasn't our checking account. That was the client escrow account. The one my firm had authorized me to manage for a real estate closing scheduled for next Tuesday. $47,000 in earnest money from a young couple buying their first home. The room tilted sideways. I sat up so fast, the migraine exploded behind my eyes. But I didn't care. I fumbled out of bed, my bare feet hitting the cold hardwood, and stumbled into the hallway. The apartment was dark and quiet. Derek's shoes were by the front door. His jacket was on the hook. He was home. He was asleep on the couch, still in his clothes, his phone face down on his chest. I stood over him, my heart pounding so hard I could feel it in my teeth. I knew exactly what had happened. I knew because I had been watching the signs for months and praying I was wrong. His mother, Rosalina, had been bleeding us dry since the day we got married. I didn't wake him. Not yet. I went back to the bedroom, sat on the edge of the bed, and forced myself to think like what I was. A forensic accountant. Not a wife, not a daughter-in-law, a professional who had just discovered a wire fraud. My hands were shaking, but my mind was already 10 steps ahead. I opened my banking app and confirmed the transfer. It was real. $47,000. Wired at 3:12 a.m. to Rosalina's Kitchen LLC, a struggling Italian restaurant in South End that had been hemorrhaging money for 2 years. The wire had been initiated using my login credentials, which Derek knew because I had made the catastrophic mistake of saving them on our shared home computer. I had told him once, casually, that the escrow account had a large deposit sitting in it for a closing. I told him because I trusted him, because he was my husband, because I never in my life imagined he would do this. I closed the app and opened my contacts. There were 2 calls I needed to make, and the order mattered. The first was to my firm's compliance officer. I got his voicemail, which I expected at 4 in the morning. I left a message, my voice steady despite the earthquake inside me. "Richard, it's Rachel. I need to report an unauthorized wire transfer from the Morrison escrow account. $47,000 was moved tonight without my knowledge or authorization. I am securing the account now and will have a full incident report on your desk by 8 a.m. Please call me as soon as you get this. The second call was to the bank's fraud department. The woman who answered was calm, almost bored, until I said the words escrow account and unauthorized wire. Then her tone shifted entirely. Ma'am, I need you to understand that escrow fund misappropriation is a federally regulated matter. We are required to file a suspicious activity report with FinCEN. Are you prepared for that? Yes, I said. File it. I hung up and sat in the dark for a long time. The migraine was gone. In its place was something worse, a cold, crystalline clarity that made everything sharp and terrible. My husband had just committed wire fraud. Not theft from a cookie jar, not borrowing from our savings. Wire fraud. A federal offense that carried up to 20 years in prison. And he did it for his mother's restaurant. Let me tell you about Rosalina. My mother-in-law was a force of nature, wrapped in an apron and doused in perfume. She ran Rosalina's Kitchen, a small Italian place she'd opened 15 years ago with money from her divorce settlement. In its early days, it had been charming: homemade pasta, checkered tablecloths, a loyal neighborhood crowd. But Rosalina refused to adapt. She wouldn't update the menu. She wouldn't fix the plumbing. She wouldn't stop over-ordering high-end ingredients she couldn't sell. The restaurant bled money like an open wound, and every single time it hemorrhaged, she called Derek. Derek was her only child, her golden boy, her little prince who could do no wrong. His father had left when Derek was 9, moved to Seattle with a dental hygienist, and never looked back. Rosalina had raised Derek alone, and she had raised him to believe that his primary purpose on this earth was to take care of her. Family first, she would say, kissing both his cheeks. Everything else is nothing. You remember that, my boy. Blood is blood. When I met Derek, he was 27, charming, warm, and completely financially gutted. He had $400 in his checking account and $22,000 in credit card debt. All of it from bailing out the restaurant. I didn't know that then. I found out 6 months into our marriage when the first call came. Derek, baby, the refrigerator broke. I need $3,000 or I lose everything. He gave it to her, from our joint savings, without telling me. When I found out, we fought. He cried. He said it was an emergency. He swore it wouldn't happen again. It happened again and again. The dishwasher, the health inspection fine, the back taxes, the new oven, always an emergency. Always $2,000 here, $5,000 there. In 2 years of marriage, Rosalina's Kitchen had consumed over $35,000 of our money. Each time I tried to set a boundary, Rosalina would call me directly, not to ask, to lecture. You don't understand family, Rachel. In my culture, we take care of each other. You Americans, you throw your parents away like garbage. My son would never abandon me. If you love him, you won't make him choose. But she wasn't asking him to choose. She was training him to choose. And she had been training him his whole life. Every guilt trip, every tear, every dramatic declaration that she would just close the restaurant and die alone, it was all engineering. She had built Derek into a machine that converted love into money. I tried to fix it. I suggested she hire a consultant. I offered to look at her books myself. I found a small business grant she qualified for. She rejected all of it. I don't need some stranger telling me how to run my kitchen. And I don't need my daughter-in-law poking through my finances like I'm a criminal. She didn't want solutions. She wanted cash. And she wanted it from Derek, delivered with guilt and gratitude. 3 months before the wire transfer, things got critical. Rosalina owed $52,000 to her landlord in back rent. The landlord had filed an eviction notice. She was going to lose the restaurant. Derek came to me with wild eyes. Babe, we have to help her. This is it. If the restaurant closes, it'll kill her. She's got nothing else. I looked at our accounts. We had $11,000 in savings. Our mortgage payment was due. My student loans were due. We were not in a position to bail out a sinking ship. Derek, we can't. We literally cannot afford it. She needs to talk to a bankruptcy attorney. Bankruptcy? You want my mother to go bankrupt? He stared at me like I'd suggested we set her on fire. She built that place from nothing, Rachel. It's her whole life. And this marriage is mine, I said quietly. I'm not going to let her drown us too. That fight lasted 3 days. Derek slept on the couch. Rosalina called me 7 times. I didn't answer. On the 4th day, Derek came to me, his eyes red. Okay. You're right. I'll tell her we can't help. He hugged me, and I believed him. I was a fool. What I didn't know, what I would only discover at 3:47 a.m., with a migraine and a phone full of fraud alerts, was that Derek never stopped looking for a way to save that restaurant. He just stopped telling me about it. He had been watching me work on the Morrison closing for weeks. He knew the escrow deposit was large. He knew I had the account credentials saved. And at some point, his mother's voice in his head got louder than mine. Family first. Blood is blood. He waited until I was incapacitated. He waited until I was asleep with a migraine. And then, at 3 in the morning, he sat down at our home computer, logged into the escrow account, and wired $47,000 to Rosalina's Kitchen, LLC. He thought he was saving his mother's restaurant. He thought he could wire the money, his mother would pay the landlord, and somehow, some way, they'd scrape together $47,000 before the Morrison closing on Tuesday. 5 days. He thought he had 5 days to perform a miracle. He thought I would never know. He had no idea that the bank sent instant alerts for escrow transactions. He had no idea that a wire from an escrow account automatically triggers a federal reporting mechanism. And he had absolutely no idea that his wife, the boring forensic accountant he'd married, was legally and professionally obligated to report exactly what he had done. I didn't sleep the rest of that night. By 6 a.m., I had drafted a full incident report. By 7, Richard from compliance called me back, and the conversation was short and grim. Rachel, you did the right thing reporting this immediately. I've already contacted our insurance carrier and the Morrisons' attorney. We're going to make the clients whole from the firm's bond, but you understand what comes next. I know, I said. The firm will file a report with the FBI's Financial Crimes Unit. This is textbook wire fraud, under 18 U.S.C. Section 1343. Rachel, I need you to hear me. Do not discuss this with your husband. Do not give him any warning. The moment you do, you become an accessory. I understand. I'm sorry. I really am. I hung up. I was sitting at the kitchen table. Derek was still asleep on the couch, 10 feet away. I looked at him. His mouth was slightly open. He looked peaceful. He looked like the man I had married 3 years ago, the one who slow danced with me in the kitchen and left little notes in my lunchbox. I felt something crack inside my chest, a deep, structural fracture that I knew would never fully heal. But I didn't cry. I couldn't afford to, not yet. I got dressed for work. Dark, gray suit, hair pulled back. No jewelry, except my wedding ring, which I stared at for a long moment before slipping it on, force of habit. I picked up my laptop bag and my incident report binder. At the door, I paused. Derek stirred on the couch. Babe, you heading out already? Early meeting, I said, not turning around. Get some rest. I closed the door behind me. The next 72 hours were a controlled demolition of my life. At the office, I was professional to the point of mechanical. I handed Richard the report, answered every question from the compliance team, and sat through a 2-hour call with the firm's legal counsel. They were sympathetic but clear. You reported promptly. Your license is not at risk, but you are now a witness in a federal investigation. Act accordingly. The Morrisons, the young couple whose $47,000 had been stolen, were devastated, but ultimately reassured when the firm made them whole from its surety bond within 48 hours. They would still close on their house. That, at least, was something. Derek, meanwhile, was oblivious. He texted me normal things, picking up Thai for dinner, and Mom says hi. She's in a great mood today. I read that last text 3 times. She's in a great mood. Of course she was. She had just received $47,000. She probably thought it was Christmas. She probably thought her boy had finally come through. She had no idea what it had cost him. I said nothing. I responded to his texts with single words. Sure, nice, okay. I came home, ate dinner across from him, watched him smile and talk about his day, and I said nothing. The forensic accountant in me understood compartmentalization. The wife in me was dying. On Thursday afternoon, 2 days before the Morrison closing, I was at my desk when Richard appeared in my doorway. His face told me everything. "They're moving fast, Rachel. The FBI Financial Crimes Task Force out of the Charlotte field office. They've reviewed the wire records, the SAR from the bank, and our report. They're executing a warrant this afternoon. For Derek? For Derek and for Rosalina's Kitchen LLC. They're treating it as conspiracy to commit wire fraud. Rachel, I strongly suggest you not be home when this happens." I nodded. I didn't trust my voice. I went to a hotel that evening. I checked in under my maiden name, sat on the edge of a stiff queen bed, and stared at the wall. My phone rang at 6:14 p.m. It was Derek. I let it ring. Then it rang again. And again. Then, the text started. "Rachel, call me now. They came to the apartment. FBI. They have a warrant. Rachel, please, I need you. They're saying wire fraud. They're saying federal charges. This is about the money, isn't it? Rachel, I can explain. Mom needed it. I was going to put it back. I swear to God I was going to put it back. Rachel, please." And then, 20 minutes later, a call from Rosalina. I answered this one. "You." Her voice was a hiss. "You did this. You called the police on your own husband. On my son. You heartless, selfish, ice-cold Rosalina," I said. And my voice was so calm it scared even me. I didn't call anyone. The bank did, automatically, because that wasn't our money. It was a federally regulated escrow account, holding funds for a real estate transaction. The moment Derek initiated that wire, a suspicious activity report was filed with the Financial Crimes Enforcement Network. I didn't have to do anything. The system did it for me. Silence. "But you told them," she stammered. "You must have told them." I reported it to my firm because I am legally required to do so. If I had covered it up, I would have lost my license, my career, and I would be facing federal charges myself. "You and your son asked me to commit a felony." I declined. "Family is supposed to come first," she screamed, and I could hear the tears, the rage, the utter disbelief that her worldview was crumbling. "Family. You don't turn your back on family for some rule. Rosalina, your definition of family is a one-way street where I pay the tolls. You've taken $35,000 from us in 2 years. You turned my husband into a thief. You told him his whole life that the rules don't apply if you love someone enough. Well, the federal government disagrees." I hung up. My hand was steady. My chest was not. Derek's arraignment was on a Monday morning. I didn't attend, but Mr. Whitfield, the criminal defense attorney I had quietly hired for Derek, because despite everything, I couldn't watch him drown without a life raft, called me afterward. He's been charged with wire fraud and unauthorized access to financial accounts. Bail is set at $75,000. His mother tried to use the restaurant as collateral, but the FBI has already frozen Rosalina's Kitchen's accounts as part of the investigation. She can't post bail. "What's the likely outcome?" I asked. "If he cooperates, and I mean fully cooperates, admits what he did, shows remorse, makes restitution, we might negotiate a plea to a lesser charge. Probation, community service, possibly a short sentence. But Rachel, his mother, is a problem. She's been telling anyone who will listen that you entrapped him, that you left the credentials accessible on purpose, that you wanted this to happen. That's not true. I know, and the evidence makes that clear. But she's making noise, and noise can complicate plea negotiations." I closed my eyes. Even now, even facing federal charges, Rosalina was still trying to blame me. She was still the architect, still pulling strings, still convinced that the world owed her son immunity because she had suffered. The final confrontation happened a week later. I had moved back into the apartment. Derek was staying with a friend. Part of his bail conditions, no contact with me without counsel present. But Rosalina didn't have bail conditions. And Rosalina didn't care about boundaries. She showed up on a Wednesday evening. I heard her heels on the hallway tile before the knock came. Sharp, frantic, furious. I looked through the peephole. She was alone. Her hair was unwashed. Her mascara was smeared. She looked like a woman who hadn't slept in days. I opened the door but blocked the entrance with my body. "You need to drop the charges," she said. "No, hello. No preamble. I can't drop federal charges, Rosalina. I'm not the prosecutor. The United States government is." "Then tell them you made a mistake. Tell them you authorized the wire. You're his wife. They'll believe you." I stared at her. She was actually asking me to commit perjury, to lie to federal investigators, to sacrifice my career, my freedom, and my integrity to protect the son she had weaponized against me. "No," I said. "You owe us," she hissed, stepping closer. "I welcomed you into this family. I cooked for you. I opened my home to you. You welcomed me as a funding source," I said. "Every dinner, every holiday, every warm embrace came with a price tag attached. You didn't gain a daughter-in-law, Rosalina. You gained an ATM." Her face twisted. For a moment, I thought she might hit me. Instead, she did something worse. She started to cry. Real tears, not performance tears. The kind that come from a place of genuine, bewildered anguish. "He's my boy," she whispered. "He's all I have. If he goes to prison, I have nothing. The restaurant is gone. The money is frozen. I'm going to lose everything." "You already lost everything," I said quietly. "You lost it the moment you decided that your restaurant was worth more than your son's freedom. You didn't just teach him to steal, Rosalina. You taught him that love means never hearing the word no. And now the federal government is saying no, and neither of you knows how to handle it." She sagged against the doorframe. She looked small. She looked old. She looked like a woman standing in the wreckage of a building she had set fire to herself. "What happens now?" she whispered. "Derek cooperates. He takes responsibility. He gets the best outcome his attorney can negotiate. And you, Rosalina, you let him. You stopped telling him to blame me. You stopped telling him he's a victim. For once in his life, let your son face a consequence. It might be the first real thing you've ever done for him." She stared at me for a long time. Then she turned and walked down the hallway without another word. She didn't slam the door. She didn't scream. She just left. And somehow, that quiet exit was louder than any tantrum she'd ever thrown. Derek pleaded guilty 4 months later to a reduced charge. The judge gave him 18 months of probation, 200 hours of community service, and full restitution to the firm's insurance carrier. His attorney told me Derek cried in the courtroom when the judge asked if he understood the consequences. "Yes, Your Honor," he'd said. I understand now. Whether he truly understood, I wasn't sure. But for the first time, he was standing in front of a consequence he couldn't charm his way out of, and his mother wasn't there to catch him. She had stopped coming to the hearings after the second one. A mutual friend told me she had closed the restaurant. Not because the FBI forced her to. The accounts were eventually unfrozen, but because without Derek's financial lifeline, the math simply didn't work anymore. She moved in with her sister in Florida. She sent Derek a card on his birthday. He didn't open it. I filed for divorce on a Tuesday in March. Derek didn't contest it. In his one permitted communication through our attorneys, he sent a short note. "I'm sorry, Rachel. Not for the money. For all of it. For every time I chose her over you and called it love. You deserved better. I know that now." I read it once, folded it neatly, and placed it in a file folder in my desk drawer. Some documents you keep not because they change anything, but because they confirm what you already knew. My firm promoted me 6 months after the case resolved. My boss called me into his office, closed the door, and looked at me with something I'd never seen from him before. "Respect. Rachel, the way you handled the Morrison incident was textbook. You reported immediately. You followed protocol. You didn't let personal circumstances compromise your professional obligations. I've recommended you for the senior investigator position." I thanked him. I didn't cry until I got to my car. The Morrison couple closed on their house on schedule. They sent me a thank you card with a photo of them standing on the front porch, grinning, holding the keys. I pinned it above my desk. It was the only decoration in my office. I moved into a new apartment, a small one-bedroom with big windows and no ghosts. I adopted a cat. I started running in the mornings. I reconnected with college friends I'd neglected during 3 years of marriage and financial chaos. My savings account, liberated from Rosalina's endless emergencies, actually started to grow. For the first time since I'd said I do, I could breathe. A colleague asked me once, over coffee, if I regretted reporting it, if I wished I'd found another way. I thought about it for a long time before I answered. He stole $47,000 from a young couple, trying to buy their first home, I said. A couple who saved for years, who trusted the system, who trusted my firm to hold their money safely. If I had covered for Derek, those people would have been the ones paying for Rosalina's restaurant, their dream house for her failing kitchen, their future for her past. I stirred my coffee. Some people think loyalty means protecting the people you love from consequences. I think loyalty means not asking them to become someone they'll hate. My colleague nodded slowly. Your ex, has he reached out since? Once, I said. He sent me a message through a friend. He said he got a job at a warehouse. He said he's in therapy. He said he finally understands that love and enabling are not the same thing. Do you believe him? I took a sip of my coffee and looked out the window at the Charlotte skyline, sharp and bright in the morning sun. I believe he wants to believe it, I said. And that's a start. I never spoke to Rosalina again. The last I heard, she was working as a line cook at someone else's restaurant in Sarasota. No ownership, no control, just a woman in a kitchen, following someone else's rules for the first time in her life. Some people would call that karma. I just call it math. The numbers always balance eventually. You can defer the payment, you can shift it to someone else, you can pretend the debt doesn't exist, but the ledger doesn't lie. It never has. And when you build your life on the assumption that someone else will always cover the bill, the day the accountant stops writing checks is the day the whole house comes down. My grandmother used to say, Rachel, a woman who knows her numbers will never be lost. She was right. The numbers saved my career. The numbers exposed the fraud. And in the end, the numbers set me free.